Hello, everyone. Still no one has joined. Maybe we wait at least. We have maybe 5 viewers to start off. And yes. Two. Okay. 4 viewers. Okay. Hello, everyone. I was waiting for at least for us to have at least 5 viewers before we continue. So yeah, maybe for our speakers, let's just have a little bit of patience, then we can start in a few minutes. 12:05. Maybe we start at 12:05. Robert, is that okay? Okay. Mm. 12:05. Okay. Okay, I guess we go ahead and start. So hi everyone and welcome to our online discussion today, where we'll be focusing on the topic of comprehensive sexuality education. With us today, we have Robert Aseda from the Network of Adolescents and African Youth, and Mwikali Kivuvani from the Kenya SRH Alliance. Maybe if I just give each one of you at least 1 minute to introduce yourselves and tell us what you do. Robert?
Hi everyone. My name is Robert, as you've heard. I work with the Network for Adolescents and Youth of Africa. We are an organization that does advocacy for sexual and reproductive health and rights in counties in Kenya, at the national level, at the regional level, as well as the international level. We also meaningfully engage young people for them to be able to claim their rights. So thank you very much, and I'm excited to be here.
Okay, thank you so
Good
much.
afternoon, everyone. This is Mwikali, Kivuvani. I'm the National Program Coordinator for the SRHR Alliance. The Alliance is a coalition of 17 organizations that all work to promote SRHR in Kenya, and our target population being 10 to 24 years old. And when we talk about promoting SRHR, we talk about encompassing everything to do with information, services, and also advocacy. And Robert Aseda works for NIA, as he's mentioned, and NIA is actually part of the alliance that he has not mentioned.
Okay, thank you so much. So there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the implementation of comprehensive sexuality education in Kenya, with a lot of pushback from the clergy and some parents arguing that implementing CSC will encourage immorality among adolescents and the youth. And we just want to look at why these concerns coming up. Is it because the CSC is misunderstood, or is it that actually that is the case? So maybe if you take us through understanding what comprehensive sexuality education is really about. Robert, you can take the first go at that.
Okay, thank you. So comprehensive sexuality education means, so first it's sexuality education that is comprehensive. And when we're defining sexuality education is that young people are able to get information on what they need on sexuality, be it information on relationships, be it information on gender norms, be it information on gender and sexual diversity, be it information on sexual and reproductive health and rights. So it is indeed very, very critical that this information is packaged in a manner that young people are able to understand, and that, of course, in line with education generally, the kind of information that a Form 1, for example, gets is different from information that Class 5 gets, for example. So when you're talking about sexuality education, then it is also age appropriate, and it's given according to the capacity of that young people to be able to access and to be able to process that information. So I would leave it at that for Mwikali to add more.
Okay, maybe what I can just add is comprehensive sexuality education is actually just it's a curriculum-based process, and in short, it just teaches and young people, and it encompasses cognitive, physical, emotional um, discussions that help promote social aspects of sexuality. So one of the biggest reasons CSC is has a lot of controversy is because people don't understand that it's actually a wholesome curriculum. It doesn't just touch on one part of sexuality, and the reason we advocate very, very strongly for CSC to be implemented is it equips young people with knowledge, skills, and attitudes, values that will actually empower them to realize their health, develop respectful social relationships. It's good for decision making, understanding and ensuring that the protection of their rights. Because the thing is, people don't also realize and understand that sexual rights are actually human rights. So you've mentioned, and maybe I'll just jump into the conversation, but you've mentioned a lot of pushback. And so I think the reason we have a lot of pushback is because of what people don't understand. So when you mention comprehensive sexuality education, of course, the term sexuality just comes there. And so people think it's just a sexualizing children. It's just talking about sex. But there's a whole lot more, like I said. It encompasses the cognitive, the physical, the emotional, the mental. So it's actually a whole curriculum, if I could say. Yeah.
Okay. You've mentioned that a lot of people, maybe the reason as to why we have a lot of pushback is because people don't really understand what it entails. So, where is it that people can find this information from? Because I think also maybe they don't really understand what it's all about because they don't know where they can find this information from.
I can say, like, for example, our website, www.srhalliance.or.ke has information. NIA's website has it. All these organizations that implement and CSC in schools and out of schools, all that information is there. And definitely the information is also on Google. A lot of the times, the organizations also use the UNESCO definition of what comprehensive sexuality is. We have the one for IPPF also. But the honest truth is the information is actually everywhere. You can find it. I think it's not, the problem is not the access to the information for people to understand what CSE is. I think the biggest problem is they don't understand what it encompasses. And because, like I mentioned earlier, the term sexuality really, that's what people have a lot of contention with. And so if people understand what the whole topic is all about, what the whole comprehensive sexuality education encompasses, then I think they'll be able better to understand and be accepting of the curriculum to be taught to young people.
Okay. So, would you say that the Kenyan curriculum supports the age-appropriate sexuality education? Robert?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add on what Mwikali has said.
Yes.
And indeed, there are very many people who are misinformed. But then, and we must say this, there are very many people who are deliberately pushing disinformation against CSE. So there are people who understand what CSE is all about, but because they want it to fit a certain narrative, they say certain things that is not true, is untrue, is unfounded. And so it's not that there is lack of information, but then there are those who lack the information, but then there are those who are deliberately, because of their values or interests, are trying to make CSE look in a certain way. Now, in terms of CSE in Kenya, Kenya has signed key documents that provide for provision of comprehensive sexuality education. For example, there is the ministerial commitment that was signed by countries in Africa, whereby they agreed that they will be providing comprehensive sexuality education. So that's a document that is there that Kenya signed to at the international level. Also, at the if you look at the human rights that Kenya has signed to, the key covenants and commitments, they also have key issues on comprehensive sexuality education. Kenya is a part of the UN family, whereby UNESCO has developed some guidelines that can be able to advise countries on how to deliver CSE. In terms of the domestic level in Kenya, we also have the education sector policy on HIV/AIDS, for example, that provides for access to comprehensive sexuality education. So in terms of the framework, the policy framework, there are a lot of policies in Kenya that provide for comprehensive sexuality education in schools, and also at the international level. The issue is now, how then are we able to move from what the policy requires to actually implement these policies that talk about CSE in general. I will leave the rest for Mwikali to add.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Robert, for even giving us that preamble into what the CSC space that Kenya has already alluded to. So, Mwanaisha, you asked about implementation of CSC in Kenya itself. So, we do have aspects of it, especially in the new curriculum. We do have aspects of CSC that have been integrated in the regular subject. However, as organizations who implement comprehensive sexuality education, we don't think it's comprehensive enough. We feel like a lot of information has been left out, and that's hence our continuous push for full implementation of comprehensive sexuality education as we know it and as we hope to implement it one day. So we have aspects of it in like biology, there's aspects of it in like CRE, even in math, and in all these other subjects. However, it is not as detailed, it is not as comprehensive, and like we are saying, that needs to be included. The comprehensiveness needs to be included so that young people are actually able to get the information in full, in totality, the way that it should be.
Okay. So, based on the policies that have been put in place in Kenya for the age-appropriate sexuality education, where can you say that the Kenyan curriculum has failed in ensuring that it's giving proper support for the implementation of this CSE? Robert?
Yeah, so I think the first issue is integrating CSE into the curriculum, which has been the major issue. Because one of the issues now is that different CSOs have different curriculums that they are using. So, for example, if the Alliance is working in 10 schools, for example, then they use their curriculum for those 10 schools, and another organization uses their curriculum. But there is no standardized curriculum that we can say is from the Ministry of Education that has key components that has the CSE in it. So I think one of the biggest gap has been in terms of looking at the policy framework and ensuring that that policy framework is implemented. And the way to implement the policy framework is by ensuring that CSE is actually integrated into the school curriculum. So, for example, you have the Kenya School Health Policy that provides for human sexuality education. But then it will just remain just that, a policy declaration, unless the CSE itself is integrated within the school curriculum, so that when learners go to school, as they learn English, they are able to understand keywords, for example, affirmation, negotiation, as they learn theory or science or social studies, or whatever it is that they're learning, there are aspects of sexuality education. And the thing about sexuality education is that it is not just something that can be in one subject, but then there are different aspects that can be integrated into different conversations. So I think that is one of the key issues that is indeed missing.
And do you think like the teachers and principals are well equipped like to be able to maybe pass the information to these students concerning sexuality education, or would you say that they require training on that?
Should I go ahead? I can see Mwikali.
Okay, yeah, I think we lost Mwikali.
Okay, yeah. Come up once more, please.
I'm saying you've just talked about integrating about integration into the current curriculum, but I just want to know, is it only the aspect of integration, or you think are the teachers well equipped to be able to pass the kind of information from CSE to the students, or they need training on that?
Yes, I definitely agree that they need training. So the way it should ideally work is that if you're looking in the long term, what needs to happen in the long term is that there needs to be CSE in the curriculum of the teachers themselves. So that as teachers come out of the teachers training colleges, there is a component of CSE so that it can be able to already strengthen their capacity for them to be able to deliver CSE. Now, because there are very many teachers who are already teaching, what can happen is that there needs to be ongoing sensitizations, for example, because some of these issues are issues around values. And so you can have a situation whereby you train a teacher to deliver CSE, but because their values are not necessarily in line, because they don't think that CSE is necessary in the first place. So it needs to come first from a place of sensitization. So we sensitize the teachers to be able to understand why CSE is important. After doing that, then we also need to organize on-job trainings for teachers on how to deliver CSE. One of the things with the Jubilee government, for example, is that when they were transitioning into, they said that there will be laptops for students, for example. And one of the key issues that happened before the laptops were given to the students is that teachers were trained on even themselves how they can be able to use laptops. And so if they know how to use laptops, then they can be able to pass that information to children. It is the same thing with CSE. And it's very, very important then that teachers are supported for them to understand what CSE is all about, and for them to be able to then impart that knowledge on the children that they engage with on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Maybe if I just go back to the pushback that we've had from the clergy and some of the opposers of the CSE implementation. I know that for the clergy, they do support abstinence, which is a good notion, but I don't know if abstinence has really been effective, especially if we look at the way there has been a rise in the number of teenage pregnancies, in Kenya. So I don't know, what do you think are the contributing factors to teenage pregnancies, and do you think implementing this CSE will be able to reduce the number of teenage pregnancies in Kenya?
Thank you, Mwanaisha, for that. First of all, I think we need to understand that CSE does not stop people from abstaining. In fact, research has shown that kids and pupils and young people who undergo CSE are able to delay sexual debut. So there is indeed evidence that having going through comprehensive sexuality education actually enables young people to delay the first time they engage in sex. And also, going through CSE, there's also research that it enables the young people who have undergone through CSE to have healthy relationships, and also to be able to avoid, for example, adverse health outcomes such as STIs, HIV/AIDS, etc., etc. Having said that, it is important that abstinence remains an option for the young people who can indeed wait. They need to be supported to be able to abstain. Having said that, we have seen that there is abstinence-only curriculums, whereby what the young people are taught is that abstain, abstain, abstain. The problem with such kind of abstinence-only curriculums is that young people are increasingly engaging in sex at a young age. So what you need to do is you need to empower them and support them and enable them to know that these are, for example, some of the consequences of that sex at this young age. These are some of the ways in which you can be able to protect yourself at that young age. When young people have that information, then they are able to protect themselves. So I think it is important that we put this conversation into perspective, because sometimes people say that when we're talking about CSE, then they think that it is, you are telling now young people that you cannot abstain anymore, but that is not what CSE is about. So I think that's the first issue. Then on the issue that you mentioned around the backlash, I think as Mwikali said earlier, it is that a lot of people are not understanding what CSE is all about. So they think that when you are proposing CSE as a solution, then you are trying to tell young people that they can't actually engage in sex at a young age. But evidence is on the contrary, that young people who have undergone CSE are in the long run able to delay their first sexual debut, and when they have their sexual debut, when they have sex for the first time, then they are able to have protected and respectful sex at that stage. Yeah.
Okay, you keep saying that a lot of people misunderstand CSE. So I just want you maybe to expound. What do you think is it that people don't mostly understand about it, and what myths surround that misunderstanding, and how can we demystify that?
Okay, I can see Mwikali has joined us. Mwikali,
Yes, I'm back.
welcome back.
Thank you.
Would you want to take that one?
Could you repeat the question? I was just coming back when Mwanaisha was asking the question.
I'm just asking about the aspects that most people misunderstand about the implementation of CSE. How can we demystify that so that they can be able to understand more about it and be willing to push for its implementation?
Okay, so when we started, like I mentioned, CSE, the problem, one of the biggest issues is the term. So we have a problem with the name comprehensive. Um, and I think it's also because of the modules that we use when we're talking about comprehensive sexuality education. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's a very wide topic, and we talk about social stuff. There's financial, there's mental, there's emotional, there's physical. But the problem is it's concentrated on one of the aspects. CSC, one of the few of the modules we teach or go through is contraceptives or family planning. We talk about safe abortion, and we also talk about LGBT or your sexuality. And so those three topics actually, to be honest, are the ones that are normally in contention. Um, and my justification or argument is normally that information is power, and we keep on saying that, but I don't know why we become blinded to it when it comes to CAC. Because when we're delivering information, and I think I had Aseda allude to this, that even when we're talking about abstinence, we are not saying that because we are teaching CSC, we are telling you not to abstain. That's not the point. The point is we are trying to give you information so you can be able to make decisions for yourself. And yesterday I was having a conversation actually with a guy called Cosmos, and I was saying, why is it that when we go to school, like when we're in high school, a lot of us did, like for example, we did chemistry. And in the chemistry lab, we are taught how to make chemicals and burn all these things, and chemicals burn, and we're told what those chemicals are for and what chemicals are bad for, and why we should not do and we should not try them at home. But we were taught those things. There's no teacher who told us, I'm teaching you this so you can go and make a bomb. And we know that these chemicals can actually do that. So I don't know the argument about when we teach CSC, we are sexualizing children and we're telling children to go and have sex. But the point for us is we are teaching children, or we are giving information so that young people can be able to make decisions on their own. Like Robert said, we are not saying that because CSC is being taught, young people should now go and have sex. We are telling you, as a young person, these are the choices. You have been given the information. It's a canvas. We are painting the canvas for you. We are giving you that information to paint this canvas for you. And now you're able to make a decision on your own. So, unfortunately, the ones who are opposing, the CSC opposers, really land on the three issues that we've talked about, telling us that, you're not supposed to tell young people about contraceptives, but they should know. So at that time when they either need to take it or not need to take it, or even forced to take it, they are aware, and awareness is important. Just to go back on a question that you had mentioned, I think when I went offline about implementation of CSC in the country, one of the biggest challenges we are having also, and see, the only way I think CSC can also move, and I'm sure Robert talked about it, is teacher preparedness. You can't expect teachers to be able to teach children something they are not comfortable and something they are not taught to teach, because you have to agree that teachers are also parents in their own homes. And so for even a teacher to be able to deliver CSC in school, they have to be sensitized on the topic. So teacher preparedness is very, very important. But I also think another aspect is also parent preparedness, because teaching starts at home. And so we have to be able to also to ensure that parents are able to deliver CSC in school.
Hello. I think we've lost
CSC.
Mwikali.
They're able to talk to their children, because going the last 2 months we've been young people. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, hello. We can hear you.
Hello? Okay. So young people, when you're talking to young people, like when we're in Kakamega, young people are saying their parents are not talking to them. But on the other side, when we're talking to parents, because we're having some table talks with our organization Teach, and the parents were saying, lakini hatujui vile kuongea na watoto. So it has to be a two-way conversation. And so we need to be able to have the teacher preparedness, the parent preparedness also, and understanding that CSC is not, we are not opening floodgates. We are giving information for important decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mwikali, for that. Maybe if you just, other than the school setting, what other avenues or opportunities exist for teenagers and young people to get relevant, age-appropriate information on sexuality? Robert, you want to respond on that? Yes, please.
Yeah, so there are indeed very many models of provision of comprehensive sexuality education. And most of the times we're just fixated on the school setup. I think it's because where they have the most learners and of course the most obvious opportunity for CSE. But indeed, there are very critical opportunities that we can be able to use to entrench CSE. So the government developed the national guidelines for provision of adolescent and youth-friendly services. And the document provides some key models that can be used in providing services to young people as well as to information. So indeed, after the school setup, there is also the clinic-based model, whereby young people can be able to go to hospitals, for example, and be able to find this information. The problem with most hospitals is that they do not have youth-friendly facilities whereby young people can be able to get non-judgmental information in a very confidential and private manner. So, for example, when you go to the hospital, it's mostly because you're very, very sick and you need services. But we need to create youth-friendly centers whereby young people can, for example, can be able to go to have conversations about sex and sexuality. They can be able to go there to get information about access to contraceptives, how to use contraceptives, what contraceptives mean. For example, they can be able to get information on healthy relationships, for example. So that's one model. Then we also have the community-based model, whereby we have these community centers whereby young people can be able to get information. But most importantly, we also have traditional community structures which can be used to get information. For example, there are these like age set forums, circumcision forums, whereby young boys and young girls and young people basically come together. This could indeed be platforms whereby we can be able to give this information. And one of the good things about the community-based models is that one of the biggest issues around the opposition to CSE is that parents, for example, feel that they are not involved. Cultural leaders and community leaders feel that they are not involved. So the community-based model is indeed a model whereby parents can be among the people who are giving out the information. The community leaders and community elders and cultural leaders can be among the people who are giving out that information. And the good thing about that model as well is that it can be customized based on the community, for example. So if the community has a very strong cultural system with elders, for example, then they can be able to use such kind of systems to provide the information. We know in our communities, for example, young girls, for example, were given information on sexuality by their aunties and grandmothers. Yeah.
Yes.
So why don't we use that model if it can work for people who live in rural areas, for example? That's an example of a model that was working before. So we can't claim that that is a new model. Then the last model is the virtual-based model, whereby we can be able to leverage on technology to be able to deliver this information. So there are very many websites, for example, that have information on CSE. There are online courses that have information on CSE. And I think it's also something that we can be able to use, especially in context of urban centers, in context where we have high internet access, whereby most young people have internet access. But the best way to deliver CSE is actually a combination of all these models, so that you have young people who are getting information in schools. When they go to the community in churches, for example, they still get information. When they go online, they still get information, so that the information becomes 360 and all round.
Mwikali, you have something to add on that? Hello?
No, I think Aseda has. I think he's concluded there. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think Aseda has mentioned it. Maybe just to add that in the delivery of CSE, it needs to be a full approach, and that's why I mentioned parents are a very important aspect of delivering CSE. And for me, I feel CSE being implemented in schools is the best way, because when you think about it, in Kenya, for example, all learners go to school. Like, the one level playing field of children in Kenya is a school. You cannot assume all children have parents or guardians. You can't assume children are being told these things at home. But every child, according to the government, every learner is supposed to be in school. So CSE is best implemented in school, because then that's a level playing field where all the young people can be able to get the information from there.
Okay.
I think Aseda has has said everything.
Okay, so maybe before we proceed to giving the audience a chance to maybe ask questions so that we can respond to them, being organizations that have been spearheading for the implementation of CSC, what are some of the lessons that you can share with the rest of the people on how the journey has been and some of the recommendations that you can give to that?
I can start. The journey has been very long and very tedious. Advocacy is not for the faint-hearted.
Yes.
You need to be ready to really work. But I think I have to give credit to the government. I have to give the credit to the Kenyan government, the Ministry of Education and Health, because as much as there's a lot of pushback, also we have been meeting on several grounds. The documents, the policy documents that Aseda had mentioned before, are all developed by the government with partnership, of course, with the relevant stakeholders. So, number one, government engagement, participation, acceptance is key. There is no other way around it, and it's not acceptance of government so that they can just put their logo and then we call it a policy or a document or an implementation guideline or whatever. It's working with the government, number one, for buy-in, and then number two, also for sustainability, and number three, even just for that partnership and collaboration, because even the donors outside, if they're coming to work with you, they also want to know how you work with the government. So I have to say that the government, irrespective of what we think about the difficulties that we've had, I have to say that they have actually really, really been trying. Now, another lesson is the partnerships of working together. Advocacy is very, very expensive. Advocacy is very hard. And so when you have organizations who are advocating for the same thing and being able to push that agenda forward together is very important. So, for example, with the Alliance, we have a CSC, CSO caucus with organizations that advocate for implementation of CSC. And when we are doing our advocacy, we don't do it alone, because of course we all understand that more voices have more power and you are at a better stage. So that's true. And then number three is just sitting and conveying the same message. CSC for me will never change. I don't care if you want to call it human sexuality, you want to call it life skills, you want to call it education, you want to call it young people's curriculum. CSC for me will never change. And so sticking to your message, appreciating that message that you have. I individually and as the head of a secretariat for the 17 organizations, I fully believe that CSC is important for young people. I will not relent in that. That is my life's work. That will be my life's goal. And so I have learned that you will have 2 steps forward and 20 steps back. But we will prevail. We will win. Young people in Kenya need to be able to get information. So it's a tiring journey. However, it's a journey that, as an organization, I can even speak for example, for Aseda, as I speak for NIAB, as the 17 organizations in the coalition, we are proud that we have taken this stand because we know the importance of it, and we will see these fruits in years to come. Open the windows.
Robert, are you there, Robert?
Yes, I'm here. So the first thing to add to what Mwikali has said is what we have learned is the critical value of engaging young people in this conversation, because we are advocating for CSC, and the people who are going to benefit from the CSC is the young people. So then how do we bring their voices into the decision-making power? So through the Alliance, we have been engaging very many young people, trying to strengthen their capacity and putting them into contact with decision makers so that they can be able to directly influence policy. We are not saying for them what they want, but then we are working with them for them to be able to clearly articulate what they want. So I think that's a key issue. What we have also learned is the critical importance of working with accountability mechanisms. So the Constitution of Kenya provides for international laws as being part of the laws of Kenya. So there are very many instruments and commitments and covenants and conventions that Kenya has signed and ratified. So we use these mechanisms to be able to hold the government accountable. For example, Kenya has been reviewed by the CEDAW committee, for example, which is the Committee on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And the committee looked at the issue of CSE in Kenya and called on the Kenyan government to implement CSE. Kenya has just finished the third cycle of the Universal Periodic Review, which looks at the issues of human rights in this country. And Kenya will officially accept the recommendations from the UPR this month. And one of the key recommendations from the Universal Periodic Review is that Kenya needs to strengthen comprehensive sexuality education for all young people. So we have indeed used these accountability mechanisms in order to hold the government accountable. So as Mwikali said, we are working with them one-on-one, but sometimes you also have to get help from other countries and the UN mechanisms and the African Union in order for them to be able to live to their obligations, which is to ensure that all young people are able to access SRHR. Then the other thing that I need to add is also on the issue of evidence. And the SRHR Alliance and its partners have been coming together to conduct researches on CSE, perception of CSE, and how to improve CSE, because it is only when we have evidence that we can be able to advocate for the issues that we want, because we do evidence-based advocacy. We just don't do advocacy for the sake of advocacy. We want our advocacy to be based on facts, and the value of evidence in doing that advocacy is very, very important. We also want to insist on what Mwikali said on partnerships, and it is very, very important to be able to strengthen a movement to work together, because most of the times, if you are working alone, you are attacked as one person, but if you're working together, then you are all able to share that burden, and you are all able to encourage one another, and I think that's also something that has been able to work for us. So those are some of the key lessons that we would say we have learned from this work on CSE.
Okay. Robert, maybe, sorry if I just take you back. When you're mentioning the other settings that the teenagers can access information, age-appropriate information, you mentioned technology. And I know that with the advanced technology, the internet, there's so much information that some of them is not quite relevant for the teenagers. How do you think we can work around this? Because they do go to the internet to find this information, and maybe some of the information they get is not actually good for them.
Yeah, that's indeed a major issue. And if you look at Google, for example, one of the key questions that young people have consistently asked on Google, for example, is what is sex? So young people want to know what sex is. And the thing about Google, as you've said, and about the internet, is that it can lead you to any site that can be able to give you wrong information, inaccurate information, or incomplete information. So one of the things that we are advocating for is that young people should be able to access this information through credible organizations. So for example, the organizations like Kenya SRHR Alliance, IPPF, UNESCO, these organizations that have a reputation and that they have credible evidence on the work that they have done. So it is indeed an opportunity for us to be able to even look at some of the information online and see what makes sense. So one of the ways in which this can be done is that the Ministry of Health, actually, when they were developing the guidelines, they say that they will be able to partner with a number of organizations to roll out this, because the ministry cannot do it on its own and they need to work on partners. So what we need is to ensure that, for example, the website of the Ministry of Health, they are updated regularly and says that this is what CSE is, or if you want more information on CSE, go to this and this website. So I think it is still very, very critical that the Ministry of Health and organizations that are working on advocacy for CSE provide such kind of platforms and linkages, and be able to say that this is the websites that you can be able to use. Some organizations, for example, like Love Matters, for example, are optimizing their searches. So for example, if you search Love Matters, for example, you will be able to be led to the Love Matters website, where you can be able to get credible information on sexuality.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert, for that. Maybe now if we take some questions from our audience so that our speakers can respond to them. Questions. No questions. Well, I guess there are no questions from the audience. Maybe if I go back to our speakers, thank you so much for the information that you've been able to share on comprehensive sexuality education. Indeed, advocacy is not a one-day thing. It takes a lot of efforts, and partnerships is key. So even as we continue to advocate for the implementation of CSE, let's remember that information is key. And when our young youth, the youth and adolescents are well informed, they're able to make good, accurate decisions concerning the sexual and reproductive health. So this is something that all of us should be actually advocating for, because it's for the benefit of the young people and for the nation as well. So if there are no questions, I think I will. There's a question. So there's a question here. How can these parents and teachers be informed and be prepared so as to educate the teens about their sexuality? Don't know who can take a go to that. Mwikali, you're there?
Yeah, please just repeat the question.
How can these parents and teachers be informed and be prepared so as to educate the teens about their sexuality?
So like we mentioned before, teacher preparedness is very important. So, you know, for teachers, it has to come from the Ministry of Education also. And I think also for me, one of the important things will be to ensure that even when teachers are going through their training at the university, like the Bachelor of Education degrees and the teachers' colleges, that this information is actually given to teachers. So they are well prepared and they are ready even as they leave and they are going to teach, that then they have that information already. For parents, we need to be able to come up and 2019, I think it was last year, 2019, there's a document that we are trying to developing with UNESCO for parents, so parent-child communication. And it's one of those things because, like I mentioned, no, it's not like parents, all of them do not want to talk to their children. Sometimes these parents also do not know what to say or how to speak to their children. So the truth of the matter is we all need to be prepared. Teachers need to be prepared, parents need to be prepared, and then young people also need to be able to ask questions, to be able, so that the questions they're also relating to, they can, when they're asking their parents, they know what they're asking. When they're asking their teachers, they know what they're asking. So there's a lot of preparedness that needs to be done. And I think with the leadership of the Ministry of Education, I think a lot of this can be done very well.
Okay. Robert, your take on that?
Yeah, I think Mwikali has captured the key issues, is that we need to also strengthen the capacity of parents for them to be able to provide this information, because as she mentioned, there are very many parents who want to have a conversation with their children, but either they are shy, they don't know what to say, they are uncomfortable. So we need to also ensure that even for them, then they get the support. And what can be done is to ensure that there are manuals that have been developed on how parents can be able to speak to their children about these issues. And when we're just talking about parents, it's not just parents alone. I think we also need to see how best we can be able to support religious leaders, for example. How can we be able to support them to be able to have conversations about these issues? Because some of these conversations are not only hard, for example, but even they may not be able to understand. So we also need to ensure that the people in the community leaders, religious leaders, even people in the media, for example, are sensitized on this and are supported to be able to provide this information to young people.
It's a good thing that you mentioned sensitization, because the next question is closely related to that. What is the best way to reach the opponents of CSE with facts so that the debate on this matter is factual? Like,
for especially those people who are opposing, I think for what we have been doing as the alliance, and like I mentioned, the caucus, the CSE caucus, we have just been providing correct, factual information. If you look at our websites, if you look at our social media pages, if you look at when we are in such forums, either webinars or any type of discussion, we have been giving the correct, factual information. They have chosen, in my opinion, to take this information round and put other things that we are not saying that's true. So I think they also need to be honest and agree when we talk about what we think CSE is, that we are not lying, because we don't have any hidden agendas. The only agenda we have for us is to ensure that young people are able to get this information. And like Robert mentioned, the most important person in this whole conversation is a young person. And so we want to, our whole issue is to empower this young person to be able to make the decision. So honestly, if we're all trying to say that we care about young people in the country, then let us sit on the table and talk. One of the principles that we have as in the Alliance is meaningful youth participation. And when we talk about MYP that Robert had mentioned earlier, meaningful youth participation means ensuring that young people are on the table discussing issues about them, for them, by them. And so if the opposition people, especially people opposing CSC, if they are actually honest about it, let's sit down on the table with these young people and ask these young people what they want. And I'm not saying that young people should the answer to make the decision via their adults, but you also cannot make decisions on behalf of young people thinking you know what they want when they are loudly saying, we want CSC.
True. Okay. So there's another question. Is CSE a health issue or an education issue? Who are the key policymakers that need to be targeted to make this a reality?
So CSE is not just an issue for the Ministry of Education or for the Ministry of Health. It actually encompasses both governments and both arms of the government and both departments and ministries working together. Because the Ministry of Health, for example, needs to come up with the curriculum, with the key issues, for example, and then the Ministry of Education needs to ensure that it is rolled out. So, and that is why it is important that there is an interministerial working group from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education, and all of them have different components to bring together in the delivery of CSE. So the Ministry of Education alone cannot be able to provide critical information, for example, on human sexuality, on health, and the Ministry of Health do not have the mechanisms and the platform to roll out CST because they don't run schools. And so it is important that we have a symbiotic relationship between the two ministries and even other ministries, for example, because even the Ministry of Youth, for example, they need to be involved in these conversations. And so I believe it is indeed the work of the entire government mechanisms to provide CSE.
Mwikali?
For me, CSE is a responsibility of all ministries because it's a Ministry of Health, it's a health issue, it's an education issue, it's a gender issue, it's a social issue, it's an interior issue because we have SGBV. So it's our issue, and the policymakers are the policymakers that we are putting in these parliaments of ours. The policymakers are our parents because our parents influence policy. Our policymakers are our teachers. Our policymakers are ourselves. CSE is not an issue for a particular category. However, of course, we understand in Kenya, our lawmakers and our policymakers are the ministers of parliament in parliament or in the county assemblies, like the county assemblies in the counties. But it needs to be a rounded discussion where we are all speaking, because even if the policymakers makes the policy, for example, in the Ministry of Health or Education, if it's not being accepted down there by the community, then it's not going to move. So it needs to be a discussion that's had, like when we're in Kakamega, like I mentioned, during the table talks, we had a discussion with the young people, then we had a discussion with the parents, then we had a discussion with the teachers, then we had a discussion with the chiefs, with the local leaders. It spirals like that. The next meeting we had was with the county as members of us, with the staff and the people who work in the Department of Health. And then we had meetings now with the county assembly members. It is a discussion for all of us. But like I said, of course, health and education, but in regards to looking at the ministries and the policymakers, I think every ministry has a responsibility of implementing CSE.
Okay. So how can people get a hold of, you seem to have done a lot of work around CSE advocacy, maybe you have case studies that you've done, reports. How can people get a hold of access that information?
Our websites are very rich. So the SRHR Alliance, like I said, www.srhralliance.or.ke. And all our partner organizations, we have NIA, AMREF, CSA is very rich. CSA is an organization that has been there since the 1980s and has been advocating for CSE ever since. It's still there. We have FHOK, we have TEACH, we have ADS Nyanza. So if you go to our website, you will see all our partner organizations, and all those partner organizations have their own website, and all those websites also have information. There's information on the UNFPA website, UNESCO website, IPPF. So the wealth of information about CSE, APHRC has done a lot of research. Gachmacha Institute has done a lot of research. So it's not like the research and the evidence and information on CSE, it's not there. It's we now need to take that information and actually do something about it. So www.srhralliance.or.ke, and then you can also follow us on all our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Kenya SRHR.
Thank you so much, Mwikali. Thank you so much, Robert, for the insightful discussion. Audience, you've had the sites where you can be able to access information that is relevant to implementation of CSE. Let's push this agenda forward because it's for the benefit of our children. And I think if there are no more questions, we can end our live.
Okay, thank you very much, Mwanaisha. I really appreciate and
so
enjoyed
much.
being on this show. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Mwanaisha. Thank you, Mwikali. Have a lovely
Bye.
afternoon.
You
You too.
too.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.